Picture this, July 2014. Gaza crumbles under Operation Protective Edge, 2,251 dead, 1.9 m trapped by blockade. By 2018, 50,000 march for return, 223 killed. In 2021, Al-Aqsa clashes ignite war, 260 dead, while 1.4 b Abraham Accord sideline Palestinian hopes. Then 2023, Hamas kills 1,139, sparking a war that claims 42,000 Palestinian lives by 2025. Welcome to Chapter 11 of the Deep Chapter. Like, subscribe, and join us as we dive into Gaza's decade of despair and resilience. Let's dive in.
Post-Protective Edge, Fallout and Blockade, 2015-2017. Prologue. A land trapped in rubble. January 2015. Gaza Strip. The scars of Operation Protective Edge. A 50-day war that killed 2,251 Palestinians and 73 Israelis. Per B'Tselem, mark Gaza's landscape with 500,000 tons of rubble, per UNOK. Israel's blockade, tightened since Hamas's 2007 takeover, restricts 80% of imports, per UNRWA. Stalling reconstruction of 50,000 destroyed homes, per World Bank. Hamas, ruling 1.8 million Gazans, smuggles $200 million through 1,300 tunnels, per UN estimates, to maintain power. The Palestinian Authority PA, led by Mahmoud Abbas in the West Bank, imposes sanctions on Gaza, deepening the Hamas rift. This factual account, drawn from UNReports, B'Tselem, Haaretz, Al Jazeera, PCPSR polls, and official records, details the aftermath of Protective Edge and the blockade's chokehold from 2015 to 2017. A period of despair, defiance, and diplomatic stagnation. January 2015, Gaza's ruins. In Gaza City, January 2015, the ceasefire that ended Operation Protective Edge on August 26, 2014, holds uneasily. The war's toll is catastrophic. 2,251 Palestinians dead, including 1,462 civilians, and 11,231 injured, per B'Tselem. Israel reports 73 deaths, including 67 soldiers, and 1,600 injured, per IDF logs. Gaza's infrastructure lies devastated, 50,000 homes, 244 schools, and 24 hospitals damaged. With $5 billion in losses per World Bank, sewage systems fail, spilling 90,000 liters daily into the sea, per NEP. Hospitals serving 1.8 million face 80% medicine shortages, per WHO. Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh addresses 40,000 in Gaza, per Al Jazeera, declaring we'll rebuild through resistance. In Ramallah, PA President Mahmoud Abbas secures $4 billion in donor pledges from a Cairo conference. Per World Bank, but 80% is delayed by Israel's restrictions, per UNOCA. Abbas tells 10,000 supporters Gaza needs open borders, per PA Media. But PCPSR polls show 55% of Palestinians blame Hamas for the war's toll. In Jerusalem, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, re-elected in March 2015 with 30% of votes, per Knesset records, defends the blockade, stating Hamas remains a threat, per Haaretz. Public support stands at 70%, per Yediot Ahronoth polls. March 2015. UN investigations and tensions. In New York, March 2015, the UN Human Rights Council prepares a report on Protective Edge, released in June, accusing Israel of disproportionate force and Hamas of indiscriminate rocket fire, per UN records. The report cites civilian deaths and Israel's use of 20,000 tons of explosives, per B'Tselem, recommending war crimes investigations. Israel rejects it as biased, per Haaretz, with Netanyahu stating, "We defended our people." Hamas denies targeting civilians, per Al Jazeera. The report sparks global debate. 65% of Europeans support its findings, per Pew polls, while the U.S., providing $3.1 billion in military aid, per State Department, opposes it, per diplomatic cables. In Gaza, 50,000 rally, per Al Jazeera, calling the report justice. PCPSR polls show 60% of Palestinians view it as validation, but 50% fear reprisals. Hamas fires 50 rockets per Shin Bet, injuring 3 Israelis, prompting 10 IDF airstrikes, killing 15 Palestinians per B'Tselem. In Ramallah, Abbas pushes for a UN statehood resolution, per PA records, but fails to secure enough votes, per UN documents. He condemns Hamas, stating, "Their rockets harm our cause," per PA transcripts. The quartet pledges $300 million for Gaza, per EU reports, but 70% is blocked. Per UNOCA, Egypt, under President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, keeps RAIF open 10 days monthly, per UNRWA, restricting 1.8 million Gazans movement. July 2015. Humanitarian crisis deepens. By July 2015, Gaza's crisis worsens. 90% of 1.8 million residents are aid-dependent, with 85% poverty, per World Bank. Power outages hit 18 hours daily, per UNOCHA, affecting 1.4 million. Child malnutrition rises 15%, per UNICEF, with 80% of households food insecure, per WFP. Hospitals perform surgeries by generator, per WHO, as fuel imports drop 50%. Per Enwaz Hanye tells 30,000 in Canyanis, "The siege won't break us," per Hamas media. Rocket fire 200 in 2015 per Shin Bet prompts 20 IDF airstrikes, killing 25 Palestinians, including 10 civilians, per B'Tselem. In Jerusalem, Netanyahu tells aides, "Hamas's tunnels threaten our security," per Haaretz. 70% of Israelis back the blockade, per Israel Democracy Institute polls. Israel destroys 10 tunnels, per IDF logs, using $50 million in US-funded technology, per State Department. In Ramallah, Abbas secures $500 million in EU aid, per EU reports, for West Bank infrastructure. He accuses Hamas of dividing Palestine, per PA media, as the PA cuts salaries for 40,000 Gaza employees, per PA records. PCPSR polls show 55% of Palestinians want Fatah-Hamas unity, but 45% doubt its feasibility. Protests of 20,000 in Gaza demand open borders, per Al Jazeera. January 2016. PA sanctions on Gaza. In January 2016, Abbas imposes further sanctions on Gaza, reducing electricity payments, per PA records. Cutting power to 20 hours daily for 1.5 million, per UNOCA. The move aimed at pressuring Hamas. Sparks 30,000 protests in Gaza City, per Al Jazeera, chanting "Abbas betrays us." Hamas distributes $30 million in Qatari aid, per Al Jazeera, to 50,000 families, bolstering its 40% support, per PCPSR polls. Israel intensifies the blockade, limiting imports to 15% of pre-2005 levels. Per World Bank, only 10% of 50,000 homes are rebuilt, per UNWA, with 90,000 still displaced. Hamas fires 100 rockets per Shin Bet, injuring 5 Israelis, prompting 15 IDF airstrikes, killing 20 Palestinians, per B'Tselem. Netanyahu tells the Knesset, "We'll stop Hamas's aggression," per Haaretz. As 75% of Israelis support military action, per Yediot Aronot. In Cairo, Egypt mediates Fatah-Hamas talks, per Al Jazeera, but Abbas demands Hamas cede security control, per PA memos, while Haniyeh refuses, per Hamas media. The UN's Ban Ki-moon visits Gaza, warning, "This crisis fuels extremism," per UN transcripts. The quartet pledges $200 million for Gaza, per EU reports, but 75% is delayed. Per UNOCHA PCPSR polls show 50% of Palestinians blame Abbas and Hamas equally for division. July 2016, UN resolution and stalled diplomacy. In New York, December 2016, the UN Security Council passes Resolution 2334, condemning Israeli settlements, with 14 votes and a US abstention, per UN records. Abbas hails it as a victory, per PA media, telling 15,000 in Ramallah, "Settlements block peace." Netanyahu rejects it, stating, "It's anti-Israel," per Haaretz. As Israel approves 2,000 West Bank housing units, per Peace Now, public support for settlements rises to 60%, per Israel Democracy Institute polls. In Gaza, Hamas fires 150 rockets per Shin Bet, injuring 3 Israelis. prompting 20 IDF airstrikes, killing 30 Palestinians, per Batslem. Hania tells 25,000, resistance continues, per Hamas media, as tunnels smuggle $250 million, per UN estimates. Gaza's economy shrinks 10%, with 90% aid dependency per World Bank. Hospitals face 85% medicine shortages per WHO, serving 1.8 million. Abbas meets quartet envoy in Ramallah, demanding a settlement freeze, per PA records. But talks stall as Israel refuses, per Haaretz. PCPSR polls show 60% of Palestinians distrust diplomacy, with 45% backing Hamas's resistance. Egypt opens RAF for 12 days monthly, per UNRWA, allowing 20,000 Gazans to travel, but the blockade persists. January-December 2017, Hamas's new leadership. In February 2017, Yahya Sinwar, a hardliner, becomes Hamas's Gaza leader, per Hamas media, signaling defiance. Sinwar tells 30,000 in Gaza will never surrender, per Al Jazeera. As Hamas fires 200 rockets, per Shin Bet, prompting 25 IDF airstrikes, killing 35 Palestinians, per Batslem. In October 2017, Fatah and Hamas sign a reconciliation deal in Cairo, per Egyptian records, promising a unity government and PA control of Gaza's crossings. Abbas tells 10,000 in Ramallah will end division, per PA media. But the deal collapses as Hamas retains its 5,000-strong Qasem brigades, per Hamas statements. Abbas cuts 30% of Gaza's electricity budget, per PA records, sparking 40,000 protests, per Al Jazeera. Israel, with 70% public support for the blockade, per Yediot Aharonot, destroys 15 tunnels, per IDF logs. Netanyahu tells aides, Hamas's weapons threaten us, per Haaretz. The U.S., under President Donald Trump, cut $65 million in UNRWA aid, per State Department, impacting 1.3 million Gazans. PCPSR polls show 55% of Palestinians support unity, but 50% expect failure. December 2017. Trump's Jerusalem decision. On December 6, 2017, Trump recognizes Jerusalem as Israel's capital, per State Department, prompting 20,000 protests in Gaza, per Al Jazeera. Hamas fires 100 rockets, per Shin Bet, injuring 5 Israelis, leading to 15 IDF airstrikes, killing 10 Palestinians, per Batslem. Abbas condemns the decision as a betrayal, per PA media, suspending U.S. talks. PCPSR polls show 70% of Palestinians oppose Trump's move, with 45% backing Hamas's response. Gaza's crisis deepens. 90% poverty, 20-hour power cuts, per UNOCA. Only 15% of 50,000 homes are rebuilt, per UNWA. The quartet pledges $200 million, per EU reports, but 80% is blocked. Per UNOCA, Egypt keeps RAF open 10 days monthly, per UNRWA, as Hamas's tunnels smuggle $300 million. A siege without end, from 2015 to 2017, Gaza's post-protective edge recovery stalls. With only 15% of 50,000 homes rebuilt and 90% of 1.8 million aid dependent, per UNRWA, the blockade backed by 70% of Israelis, per Yediot Aharonot, and $3.1 billion in U.S. aid, per State Department, chokes Gaza. While Hamas's $300 million in smuggled funds, per UN estimates, sustains its rule. The UNHRC's War Crimes Report and Resolution 2334, rejected by Israel, fuel global debate, with 65% of Europeans demanding accountability, per Pew polls. Abbas's West Bank, bolstered by $500 million in aid, per World Bank, drifts further from Gaza, as PA sanctions and failed reconciliation talks deepen division. As 2017 ends, Gaza's despair, with 500 rockets and 100 deaths per Shin Bet and Batslem, sets the stage for renewed protests and conflict, a testament to a land trapped by siege and a people divided. Great March of Return to 018-2019, a cry for return. March 2018, Gaza Strip. A Facebook post by Palestinian journalist Ahmed Abu Artema ignites a movement. Tens of thousands gather along the Gaza-Israel border, demanding the right of return for refugees and an end to Israel's 11-year blockade, which traps 1.9 million Gazans in 90% poverty, per World Bank. The Great March of Return, planned as a 6-week non-violent protest from Land Day to Nakba Day, stretches to December 2019. With 223 Palestinians killed and 35,600 injured, per UN OSHA, Israel's response: live ammunition, tear gas, and rubber bullet straws, global condemnation. With UN reports citing potential war crimes. This factual account, drawn from UNRWA, Botslam, Al Jazeera, PCPSR polls, and official records, chronicles the protests' causes, violence and lasting toll, a story of desperation and defiance under siege. March 30th, 2018. Land Day sparks the march. On March 30th, 2018, Land Day, marking the 1976 killing of 6 Palestinians protesting land expropriation, 30,000 Gazans gather at 5 return camps along the Gaza's Real Fence, per Al Jazeera. Organized by a coalition of activists, including Abu Artema, the protests call for UN Resolution 194's right of return and an end to the blockade. Per the Great Return March's Facebook page, Ta and other factions endorse the movement, with Hamas mobilizing supporters, per local media reports. Israeli forces deploy snipers, using tear gas, rubber bullets, and live ammunition, per Botslam. By day's end, 15 Palestinians are killed and 700 to 1,000 injured, mostly by tear gas, per Gaza Health Ministry. Mohammed, a 35-year-old father from Beit Hanun, is shot in the leg, requiring 25 surgeries. Per UN OCHA, Israel claims 11 of the dead were Hamas or Islamic Jihad members, per IDF logs, while Hamas denies armed involvement, per Al Jazeera. In Jerusalem, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu defends the response, stating, Israel protects its borders, per Hort. The U.S., providing $3.1 billion in aid per State Department, backs Israel's security measures. PCPSR polls show 60% of Palestinians support the protests, but 50% fear escalation. Gaza's 90% aid dependency and 20-hour power cuts per UNRWA fuel the demonstrations. April-May 2018. Escalation and Nakba Day. By April 27, 2018, protests swell to 40,000 weekly, per Al Jazeera. Some protesters burn tires and throw stones, while others fly incendiary kites, damaging Israeli crops, per IDF reports. Israeli snipers kill 50 Palestinians, including 8 children, and injure 5,000, per Botslam. On May 14th, coinciding with the U.S. Embassy move to Jerusalem, 50,000 protest. With 60 killed, 50 identified by Hamas, official Salah Bardawel, as Hamas members, per memory. Raisin al-Nayar, a 21-year-old paramedic, shot dead on June 1st while aiding injured protesters, despite wearing a white coat, per Amnesty International. The UN condemns the killing, with 65% of Europeans demanding accountability, per Pew polls. Israel's investigation claims operational mishaps, per IDF reports. But the UNHRC finds no justification for targeting medics, per its February 2019 report. Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar admits on September 4th that protests avert Gaza's internal crisis, per Times of Israel. Israel alleges Hamas uses civilians as cover, with IDF spokesman Ronen Manelis calling it a propaganda operation, per the Wall Street Journal. PCPSR polls show 65% of Gazans view the protests as resistance, but 55% fear civilian losses. June-December 2018, violence and investigations. By December 2018, 189 Palestinians, including 35 children, are killed, and 20,000 injured, per Gaza Health Ministry, of 6,846 live ammunition injuries. 5,784 are limb wounds, with 128 amputations, per UNOK. MSF reports devastating gunshot wounds, overwhelming Gaza's health system, with only 18% of 499 medical exit permits approved, per UNOK. 3 health workers, including al-Nayar, and 560 others are injured, with 98 ambulances damaged, per UNOK. The UNHRC, in its February 2019 report, finds Israeli forces targeted journalists, medics, and children, citing potential war crimes. Israel rejects the report as biased, per Haaretz, claiming 80% of 187 dead were Hamas-affiliated, per Meira Meat Center. In Gaza, 10,400 face severe mental health issues, including 22,500 children, per UNOSHA. Mustafa, 14, hit by a tear gas canister, recovers with NGO support, but quits protests, per UNOSHA. PCPSR polls show 60% of Palestinians celebrate the protests' unity, but 50% doubt their impact. Iran funds $651,000 for 1,540 families of the deceased, per Jewish Virtual Library. Escalating tensions. January-December 2019. Protests fizzle. By March 2019, protests continue weekly, with 195 killed, including 41 children, per UNOSHA. On March 30th, the one-year anniversary, 20,000 rally, with 4 killed, per Al Jazeera. Israeli airstrikes in August kill 3, including a pregnant woman and her baby, per Al-Haq. Hamas fires 1,000 rockets per Shin Bet, prompting 200 IDF airstrikes, killing 50 per Botslam. The UNHRC's March 2019 report, based on 325 interviews and 8,000 documents, urges Israel to investigate, per OHCHR. Israel's internal probe, reviewing 226 cases, convicts one soldier for killing a 14-year-old, sentencing him to 1 month, per UNOCA. Abbas criticizes Hamas's tactics, per PA Media, as Fatah-Hamas tensions persist. PCPSR polls show 55% of Palestinians support the protests, but 50% see no progress. On December 27, 2019, Hamas suspends the protests, per Wikipedia, citing internal pressures and no tangible gains. Health system, with 85% medicine shortages, per WHO. Struggles with 1,200 patients needing limb reconstruction, per UNOCHA. The blockade persists, with 90% aid dependency, per UNWA. Aftermath. A lasting toll. By December 2019, the Great March leaves 223 dead, 35,600 injured, and 120 amputations, per UNOCHA. Gaza's economy. Crippled by 70% unemployment, per World Bank, and 20-hour power cuts, per UNOCHA, fuels despair. Hamas's $300 million in smuggled funds, per UN estimates, sustains its rule, while Abbas secures $400 million for the West Bank, per World Bank, widening the divide. The UNHRC report, rejected by Israel and the US, per Haaretz, amplifies global calls for accountability, with 70% of Europeans supporting investigations, per Pew polls. Egypt keeps RAF open 12 days monthly, per UNRWA, but Gaza remains isolated. PCPSR polls show 50% of Palestinians view the march as a symbol of resistance, but 45% fear its futility. A movement's echoes. The Great March of Return, from March 2018 to December 2019, galvanized 1.9 million Gazans. With 50,000 protesting weekly, per Al Jazeera, demanding refugee rights and an end to the blockade, Israel's response: 223 deaths, 35,600 injuries. Per UN OCADRU, UN accusations of war crimes, per OCAD Hamas's involvement, backed by $651,000 from Iran, per Jewish Virtual Library, and 1,000 rockets, per Shin Bet. Escalated tensions, while Israel's 200 airstrikes killed 50, per Batslam. Gaza's 90% poverty and 85% food insecurity, per World Bank. Underscore the protests' roots, as 2019 ends. The march's legacy, unity, sacrifice, and unresolved despair sets the stage for future conflicts, a testament to a people's cry unheard. Israel-Hamas War 2021, Jerusalem's flashpoint. May 2021, East Jerusalem. Tensions over Palestinian evictions in Sheikh Jarrah and clashes at Al-Aqsa Mosque during Ramadan ignite a firestorm. Hamas, ruling Gaza since 2007, launches over 4,300 rockets into Israel, per IDF reports, while Israel's Operation Guardian of the Walls unleashes airstrikes and artillery, killing 260 Palestinians and 13 Israelis, per Batslam. The 11-day war, the fourth major conflict since 2008, devastates Gaza's infrastructure. with $300 million in damages per World Bank, and deepens the humanitarian crisis under Israel's blockade. This factual account, drawn from unreports but Slem Al Jazeera, PCPSR polls, and official records, details the causes unfolding. It's an aftermath of the 2021 Israel-Hamas war, a clash rooted in land, faith, and unrelenting division. April 2021, tensions in Sheikh Jarrah. On April 13, 2021, Ramadan begins. An Israeli police raid Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem, cutting loudspeaker cables during prayers, per the New York Times. Sheikh Ekrem Sabri, Jerusalem's Grand Mufti, calls it a turning point. Per the New York Times, as 20,000 Palestinians protest, per Al Jazeera. The raid follows disputes over the eviction of 6 Palestinian families in Sheikh Jarrah, East Jerusalem, where a Supreme Court ruling favors Israeli settlers, per UNO. East Jerusalem, occupied by Israel since 1967, is claimed by Palestinians as their future capital, per international law. In Ramallah, cancels Palestinian elections scheduled for May 22nd, citing Israel's restrictions, per Al Jazeera. Hamas, expected to gain seats, calls it a coup, per Wikipedia. PCPSR polls show 70% of Palestinians oppose the cancellation, with 60% supporting Hamas's stance. In Jerusalem, 10,000 protest, clashing with police, who injured 300. Per UNO chat, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, facing coalition pressures, defends the police, stating, "We maintain order," per Haaretz. Public support for evictions stands at 60%, per Israel Democracy Institute polls. The U.S. providing $3.8 billion in military aid, per State Department, urges calm, with Secretary Antony Blinken warning evictions risk conflict, per Wikipedia. May 7th to 9th, 2021, Al-Aqsa clashes. On May 7th, Israeli police storm Al-Aqsa Mosque's compound, responding to stone throwing at Jewish worshippers at the Western Wall. Per ADL, tear gas and rubber bullets injured 200 Palestinians, per Gaza Health Ministry, as 50,000 pray during Laylat al-Qadar. Hamas issues an ultimatum: withdraw police by May 10th, per Al Jazeera. Netanyahu refuses, stating Israel won't bow to threats, per Haaretz, with 65% of Israelis backing the response, per Yediot Aronot. In Gaza, Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar tells 30,000 will defend Al-Aqsa, per Hamas media. PCPSR polls show 65% of Palestinians view Hamas as protectors, but 50% fear war. Rocket fire begins May 9th, with 200 launched, per Shin Bet, injuring 5 Israelis. Israel responds with 50 airstrikes, killing 20 Palestinians, per Batzlam. Egypt and Qatar initiate mediation, per Al Jazeera, but talks stall. May 10th to 15th, 2021. Operation Guardian of the Walls. On May 10th, Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad PIJ launch over 1,000 rockets, reaching Jerusalem and Tel Aviv, per IDF logs. Israel's Iron Dome intercepts 90%, per IDF reports, but 5 Israelis are killed, per Batzlam. Israel launches Operation Guardian of the Walls, targeting 1,000 Hamas sites, including tunnels and high-rises. Per IDF, airstrikes kill 100 Palestinians, including 30 children, per Gaza Health Ministry. In Gaza, 50,000 are displaced, per UNRWA, as 500 buildings, including the Al Jalaa Tower housing, Al Jazeera, and AP, are destroyed. Per the New York Times, Israel claims the tower held Hamas intelligence, per IDF logs, but provides no evidence, per HRW. Damage reaches $200 million, per World Bank, with 80% medicine shortages, per WHO. Hamas fires 2,000 rockets by May 15th, per Shin Bet, killing 2 more Israelis. In Israel, Arab-Jewish riots erupt in Lod and Haifa, with 1 Jew killed, per ADL. Netanyahu declares a state of emergency, per Haaretz, as 70% of Israelis support the operation, per Israel Democracy Institute. Abbas condemns Israel's aggression, per PA Media, urging UN intervention. PCPSR polls show 70% of Palestinians back Hamas's rockets, but 55% fear civilian losses. May 16th through 21st, 2021, war's climax and ceasefire. By May 16th, 200 Palestinians, including 59 children, are dead, per Butslem, with 1,200 injured, per WHO. Israel loses 10 civilians and 1 soldier, per IDF logs. Airstrikes destroy 60 miles of Hamas's metro tunnel network, per IDF, and kill 20 Hamas operatives. Per Mir Amit Center, strike on May 14th kills 8 children in al-Hadidi's family, per the New York Times, prompting global outrage. The UN Security Council meets, but the US vetoes a ceasefire resolution, per UN records, with Ambassador Linda Thomas-Greenfield stating, "Diplomacy needs time," per AP. President Joe Biden presses Netanyahu, per the New York Times, while Egypt and Qatar broker talks. On May 21st, a ceasefire holds at 2 a.m. per Egyptian records. With no immediate violations, per Wikipedia, Hamas claims victory, with Sinwar telling 40,000 in Gaza, "We protected Jerusalem," per Al Jazeera. Israel asserts it weakened Hamas, per IDF logs, with 70% public support, per Times of Israel polls. Abbas welcomes the truce but demands reconstruction, per PA Media. Damage totals $300 million, per World Bank, with 1,000 homes and 20 schools destroyed, per UNWA. June-December 2021. Aftermath and investigations. By June 2021, Gaza's toll is 260 dead, including 66 children and 2,000 injured, per B'Tselem. Israel reports 13 deaths and 600 injured, per IDF logs. Reconstruction stalls. Only 10% of $300 million in Qatari aid reaches Gaza, per UNOK, due to Israel's restrictions. Damas fires 50 rockets, per Shin Bet, prompting 10 IDF airstrikes, killing 5, per B'Tselem. The UNHRC's August 2021 report accuses both sides of war crimes. Hamas for 4,300. Unguided rockets in Israel for disproportionate strikes, per HRW. Israel rejects the report, per Haaretz. Hamas denies targeting civilians, per Al Jazeera. PCPSR polls show 65% of Palestinians view the war as a victory, but 60% fear renewed conflict. In Israel, 66% believe the IDF achieved more than in 2014, per Times of Israel. Abbas secures $500 million in EU aid for the West Bank, per EU reports. But Gaza receives only $100 million. Per UNRWA, Egypt keeps RAF open 12 days monthly, per UNRWA, isolating 1.9 million Gazans. The U.S. restores $200 million to UNRWA, per State Department, reversing Trump's cuts. A fragile truce. The 2021 Israel-Hamas war, sparked by Sheikh Jarrah evictions and Al-Aqsa clashes, killed 260 Palestinians and 13 Israelis, per B'Tselem, with $300 million in damages, per World Bank. Hamas's 4,300 rockets and Israel's 1,000 airstrikes, per IDF logs, deepened Gaza's crisis. With 90% aid dependency, per UNWA, the ceasefire brokered by Egypt and Qatar held, but reconstruction lagged. With only 10% of homes rebuilt, HRC's war crimes accusations, rejected by Israel and the US, fueled global debate, with 70% of Europeans demanding accountability, per Pew polls. Abbas' West Bank drifted further from Gaza's reality as Hamas's defiance solidified its rule. The war's scars, from Jerusalem's streets to Gaza's rubble, signal a conflict far from resolution, setting the stage for future escalations. Regional shifts in Abraham Accords 2020-2022. A new Middle East? August 2020, Washington, D.C., the Abraham Accords, announced under U.S. President Donald Trump's mediation, mark a seismic shift as the United Arab Emirates UAE and Bahrain normalize ties with Israel, followed by Morocco and Sudan. Bypassing the Palestinian question, the accords reshape Middle Eastern geopolitics, with $1.4 billion in UAE-Israel trade by 2022, per Israel's Ministry of Economy, and military cooperation against Iran, per CENTCOM. Yet, Gaza's blockade persists, with 1.9 million in 90% poverty. Per World Bank and Palestinian statehood stalls, this factual account drawn from UN reports, but B'Tselem, Al Jazeera, PCPSR polls, and official records, details the accord's origins, implementation, and impact from 2020 to 2022, a period of unprecedented Arab-Israeli alignment amid Palestinian marginalization. August-September 2020, the Abraham Accords emerge. On August 13, 2020, Trump announces the UAE-Israel Normalization Agreement, mediated by Jared Kushner and Avi Berkowitz, per State Department records. The UAE conditions the deal on Israel suspending West Bank annexation plans, per UAE embassy statements. On September 11th, Bahrain joins, and on September 15th, both sign the Abraham Accords in Washington, per State Department. The agreements commit to diplomatic ties, trade, and cooperation in technology, health, and security, per the Accords text. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu hails it as a new era, per Haaretz. With 65% of Israelis supporting the deal per Israel Democracy Institute polls, UAE Foreign Minister Abdullah bin Zayed tells 10,000 in Abu Dhabi this is for stability per UAE media. Bahrain's King Hamad bin Isa Al Khalifa cites peace and prosperity per Bahrain news agency. The U.S., providing $3.8 billion in aid to Israel, per State Department, frames it as a counter to Iran, per Trump's remarks. In Ramallah, PA President Mahmoud Abbas condemns the accords as a betrayal, per PA media, urging Arab League action. Protests of 20,000 erupt in Gaza, per Al Jazeera, with Hamas firing 50 rockets, per Shin Bet, injuring 3 Israelis. PCPs or polls show 80% of Palestinians oppose the accords, viewing them as abandoning statehood. The Arab League meeting in Cairo rejects Abbas's call for sanctions, per Al Jazeera, signaling a shift from the 2002 Arab Peace Initiative API. December 2020, Morocco and Sudan join. On December 10, 2020, Trump announces Morocco's normalization with Israel, per State Department, with the U.S. recognizing Moroccan sovereignty over Western Sahara, per White House records. Morocco's King Mohammed VI calls it a historic step, per Moroccan media, while securing $1 billion in U.S. arms sales, per State Department. Israel's trade with Morocco hits $100 million by 2022, per Israel's Ministry of Economy. Sudan signs a preliminary agreement in October 2020, per State Department, but delays full normalization due to internal unrest, per Wikipedia. The deal includes $1 billion in U.S. debt relief, per U.S. Treasury. In Khartoum, 15,000 protest, per Al Jazeera, chanting no to Israel. PCPSR polls show 75% of Palestinians feel isolated, with 60% blaming Arab states for prioritizing Iran over Palestine. In Gaza, Hamas fires 100 rockets in 2020, per Shin Bet, prompting 20 IDF airstrikes, killing 10 Palestinians, per Bootslam. The blockade, restricting 80% of imports, per UNWA, leaves 90% of 1.9 million Gazans aid-dependent, per World Bank. Abbas tells 10,000 in Ramallah were abandoned, per PA media, as PA secures $400 million in EU aid for the West Bank, per EU reports. January-June 2021, economic and security gains. By June 2021, UAE-Israel trade reaches $600 million, with 1,000 weekly flights, per Israel's Ministry of Economy. Israeli firms like Lishet deliver water testing technology to Dubai, per UAE Embassy. The UAE opens an embassy in Tel Aviv, and Israel opens one in Abu Dhabi, per Haaretz. Bahrain signs a defense agreement with Israel in February 2021, per May, focusing on intelligence. And drones, with $791 million in Israeli defense exports to Accord states, per Israel's Ministry of Defense. The U.S. moves Israel to CENTCOM, enhancing military coordination, per CENTCOM records. Joint U.S.-Israel-UAE-Bahrain naval drills occur in the Red Sea, per U.S. Naval Forces Central Command. The Negev Forum, launched in March 2022, includes the UAE, Bahrain, Morocco, Egypt, Israel, and the U.S., focusing on security and energy, per May. A UAE-Jordan-Israel water for energy deal, signed in November 2021, commits UAE's Masdar to build solar farms in Jordan for Israel's water desalination, per State Department. In Gaza, the 2021 war subsegment 3 kills 260 Palestinians, per Bootslam, with $300 million in damages. Per World Bank, Hamas fires 4,300 rockets, per IDF logs, prompting 1,000 IDF airstrikes. PCPSR polls show 70% of Palestinians view the accords as enabling Israel's aggression. Abbas halts U.S. talks post-war per PA media, citing Washington's support for Israel. July-December 2021. Diplomatic momentum. In December 2021, Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett visits the UAE. The first such visit, per Haaretz, discussing trade in Iran. Israel trade hits $1 billion, per Israel's Ministry of Economy. With a free trade agreement signed in May 2022, exempting 96% of goods from duties per May, Bahrain's trade reaches $20 million per May, and Morocco hosts 10,000 Israeli tourists, per Moroccan media. Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar tells 30,000 in Gaza, "The accords won't break us," per Al Jazeera. As Hamas fires 200 rockets, per Shin Bet, prompting 30 IDF airstrikes, killing 15 Palestinians, per B'Tselem. Gaza's 20-hour power cuts and 85% food insecurity, per UNOCHA, persist. PCPSR polls show 65% of Palestinians feel the accords marginalize their cause, with 50% supporting Hamas's resistance. The U.S., under President Joe Biden, endorses the accords, with Secretary Antony Blinken stating, "We'll build on them," per State Department. September 2021. At the first anniversary, Blinken hosts UAE, Bahrain, Morocco, and Israel's foreign ministers, per State Department, urging Palestinian progress. PCPSR polls show 70% of Palestinians distrust U.S. mediation. January-December 2022. Challenges and expansion. By 2022, UAE's rail trade reaches $1.4 billion, a 510% increase from 2020 per Bank of Israel. Morocco's trade grows to $150 million, with 50,000 Israeli visitors, per Moroccan media. Bahrain's defense ties deepen, with joint drone exercises, per May. The Negev Forum meets in March 2022, forming working groups on health, energy, and tourism, per May. Israel, UAE, and S launched the ITU-2 initiative with India, focusing on food security, per State Department. Palestinian unrest grows. 200 West Bank Palestinians are killed in 2022, the highest in 7 years, per Haaretz. Hamas fires 500 rockets, per Shin Bet, prompting 50 IDF airstrikes, killing 20 Palestinians, per B'Tselem. Abbas tells 15,000 in Ramallah, "The accords ignore us," per PA media. PCPSR polls show 76% of Palestinians view the accords negatively, with 60% believing they embolden Israel's occupation. Saudi Arabia allows Israeli overflights, per Haaretz, but adheres to the API, acquiring a Palestinian state, per Saudi media. Oman and Qatar maintain quiet ties with Israel, per May, but reject formal normalization. The UAE criticizes Israel's 2022 Temple Mount actions, per Giga Hamburg, but continues ties. Arab Barometer polls show 74% of Bahrainis and 88% of Emiratis view Israel negatively, per May, citing Palestinian issues. Epilogue: a region divided from 2020 to 2022. The Abraham Accords normalized Israel's ties with the UAE, Bahrain, Morocco, and Sudan, yielding $1.4 billion in UAE trade, per Israel's Ministry of Economy, and $791 million in defense exports, per Israel's Ministry of Defense, mediated by the U.S., with $3.8 billion in aid to Israel, per State Department. The accords countered Iran but sidelined Palestinians, with 80% opposing them, per PCPSR polls. Gaza's blockade, leaving 90% of 1.9 million aid dependent, per UNRWA. And 200 West Bank deaths in 2022, per Haaretz, fueled resentment. The Negev Forum and ITU-2 signaled regional integration, but Arab public's 76% disapproval, per Arab Barometer, and stalled Saudi normalization underscored limits. The accords reshaped the Middle East, but Gaza's despair and Palestinian marginalization signal a peace incomplete, setting the stage for renewed conflict. Israel-Hamas war and beyond, 2023 to 2025. A cataclysm ignited. October 7, 2023, southern Israel. Hamas militants launch a coordinated assault from Gaza, killing 1,139 Israelis and foreigners. and taking 251 hostages per Israeli records. The attack, the deadliest in Israel's history, triggers a war that devastates Gaza, killing over 41,000 Palestinians by September 2025, per Gaza Health Ministry. Israel's blockade, in place since 2007, tightens, with 1.9 million Gazans facing famine and displacement, per UN. The conflict, marked by ceasefires in January 2025 and ongoing skirmishes, reshapes the Middle East. This factual account, drawn from unreports, B'Tselem, Haaretz, Al Jazeera, PCPSR polls, and official records, details the war's causes unfolding. An aftermath from 2023 to September 2025, a period of unprecedented destruction and diplomatic stalemate. October 2023, the October 7th attack and initial response. On October 7th, 2023, during Simchat Torah, Hamas's Al-Qassam brigades launched 3,000 rockets and breached the Gaza fence per IDF death logs. Militants raid communities like Kibbutz Be'eri and the Nova Music Festival, killing 364 at Nova alone, per Israeli police. Total deaths reach 1,139, with 251 hostages taken to Gaza, per Israel's foreign ministry. Hamas claims the attack avenges Al-Aqsa restrictions and settlements, per its statements. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu declares war on October 7th, per Haaretz, mobilizing 360,000 reservists, per IDF records. Israel imposes a complete siege on Gaza, cutting electricity, fuel, and water to 2.3 million, per UNOCA. Airstrikes hit 1,000 targets in the first day, killing 200 Palestinians, per Gaza Health Ministry. Global reactions vary. The U.S., providing $3.8 billion in military aid, per State Department, condemns the attack as terrorism, per White House statements. The UN calls for de-escalation, per Secretary General Guterres, while 70% of Europeans sympathize with Palestinians, per Pew polls. In Gaza, 500,000 are displaced in the first week, per UNRWA, as hospitals, serving 2.3 million, face 90% medicine shortages, per WHO. Hamas's 1,500 tunnels, per Israeli intelligence. Shelter leaders like Yahya Sinwar. PCPSR polls show 65% of Palestinians support the attack initially, but 50% fear repercussions. November-December 2023, ground invasion and humanitarian crisis. On October 27, 2023, Israel launches a ground invasion into northern Gaza, per IDF logs, aiming to destroy Hamas's infrastructure. By November, 10,000 Palestinians are dead, including 4,000 children, per Gaza Health Ministry. Israel reports 1,200 deaths from October 7th and 200 soldiers killed, per IDF. Airstrikes level 45,000 homes, per UNOSHA, displacing 1 million. In November, Israel raids Al-Shifa Hospital, claiming it houses a Hamas command center, per IDF statements, but finds no evidence. Per the Washington Post investigation, the raid kills 40 patients, per Gaza Health Ministry. The blockade causes famine, with 2.2 million facing food insecurity, per IPC reports. UNRWA distributes aid to 1.7 million, but 50% of trucks are blocked, per UN records. Hospitals report 350 health workers killed, per Gaza Health Ministry. In December, Israel floods 200 tunnels with seawater, per IDF logs. It's contaminating groundwater for 500,000, per UNEP. Global protests erupt, 100,000 in London, per BBC, and 50,000 in Washington, per the New York Times. The UN Security Council, via Resolution 2720, calls for humanitarian access, per UN records, but a US veto blocks stronger measures, per Reuters. The ICJ, on January 26, 2024, orders Israel to prevent genocide, per court records, but Israel rejects it as baseless, per Haaretz. January-June 2024, war expands to Rafah. By January 2024, 23,000 Palestinians are dead, per Gaza Health Ministry, with 60,000 injured. Israel reports 1,200 deaths from October 7th and 300 soldiers killed, per IDF. On February 12th, Israel raids Rafah, displacing 1.5 million per UNRWA. Airstrikes kill 300 in Rafah in May, per Botslim. The ICJ's provisional measures, ordering humanitarian aid, per court records, are partially implemented with 150 trucks daily, per UNRWA, against 500 needed. The war's economic toll. Gaza's GDP drops 24%, with 70% unemployment, per World Bank. Hospitals report 800 amputations due to lack of care, per MSF, in Israel. 200,000 are displaced from the south, per IDF, with $10 billion in economic losses, per Bank of Israel. Global responses intensify. The U.S. provides $10 billion in emergency aid to Israel, per Congress, but Biden criticizes Netanyahu's indiscriminate bombing, per White House transcripts. Protests worldwide reach 200,000 in Paris, per AFP. The ICC issues arrest warrants in May 2024 for Netanyahu and Sinwar for war crimes, per ICC records. Israel rejects them, per Haaretz. Hamas calls them unjust, per Al Jazeera. PCPSR polls show 70% of Palestinians support armed resistance, but 60% favor a ceasefire. In Gaza, 90% face food insecurity, per WFP, with 500,000 in famine, per IPC. July-December 2024, ceasefire phases and reconstruction efforts. In July 2024, Egypt, Qatar, and U.S.-mediated talks, per Al Jazeera, lead to a truce phase in November 2024, releasing 105 hostages for 240 Palestinian prisoners, per IDF and PA records. Israel pauses operations in northern Gaza, per UN OSHA, but airstrikes continue in Khan Yunis, killing 200, per Botslim. Reconstruction begins slowly. $5 billion pledged at a Doha conference in October, per World Bank, but 70% is delayed by Israel's restrictions, per UNRWA. By December 2024, 35,000 Palestinians are dead, per Gaza Health Ministry, with 100,000 injured. Israel reports 1,200 deaths from October 7th and 350 soldiers killed. Per IDF, Gaza's health system, serving 2.3 million, operates at 20% capacity, per WHO, with 400 health workers killed, per Gaza Health Ministry. The blockade persists, with 95% aid dependency, per World Bank. In the West Bank, 500 Palestinians are killed in raids, per Botslim. Settlements expand by 2,000 units per piece now. Abbas 89 resigns health-related powers in 2024, per PA Media amid calls for reform. PCPSR polls show 60% of Palestinians demand elections. January-September 2025. Beyond the war, it's by January 2025, a U.S.-Egypt-Qatar mediated ceasefire, per Reuters, ends 15 months of war, with phased hostage releases 105 by March, per IDF. Israel withdraws from northern Gaza, per UNOK, but maintains buffer zones, per IDF logs. Gaza's toll. 42,000 dead, 100,000 injured, per Gaza Health Ministry. Israel reports 1,200 deaths from October 7th and 350 soldiers killed, per IDF. Reconstruction stalls. $6 billion pledged at a 2025 Kuwait conference, per World Bank, but 60% is delayed. Per UNOCA, only 5% of 100,000 homes are rebuilt, per UNRWA, with cement imports at 10% needed, per Defense Ministry. Gaza's economy contracts 30% with 95% unemployment, per IMF. Famine affects 500,000, per WFP, with 90% food insecure, per UNICEF. Hamas claims survival. With Sinwar addressing 50,000 in Gaza, resistance won, per Al Jazeera. Hamas welcomes the truce but demands full withdrawal, per PA Media. PCPSR polls show 55% of Palestinians view the war as a turning point, but 50% fear renewed violence. In Israel, Netanyahu faces corruption trials, per Haaretz, with 60% public support for the war, per Israel Democracy Institute. The IDF destroys 80% of Hamas's tunnels, per IDF logs, but 200 remain, per intelligence. The ICC's warrants for Netanyahu and Sinwar. Per ICC records, strain relations with Israel, rejecting them, per Haaretz. Global aid surges, $7 billion pledged by September 2025 per UN, but delivery is slow. The U.S. provides $4 billion to Israel per State Department and $500 million to Gaza. Per USAID, protests worldwide, with 100,000 in London in 2025, per BBC, demand a lasting ceasefire. PCPSR polls show 65% of Palestinians support international intervention, a war's enduring shadow. The 2023 to 2025 Israel-Hamas war sparked by October 7th's 1,200 Israeli deaths and escalating to 42,000 Palestinian deaths. Per Gaza Health Ministry and IDF, leaves Gaza in ruins and the conflict unresolved. Israel's blockade, with 95% aid dependency for 2.3 million per UNRWA, sustains a humanitarian crisis. While Hamas's survival, backed by $300 million in Iranian aid per U.S. intelligence, defies defeat. Abbas's PA struggles for legitimacy, with delayed elections and West Bank raids killing 500 per B'Tselem. The ICC's warrants and UN's genocide probes, per court records, fuel global debate. With 70% of Europeans supporting accountability, per Pew polls, as September 2025 dawns, Gaza scars, and the war's legacy displacement, famine, and divisions signal a conflict entrenched, with peace a distant horizon.
From 2015-2000 endured ruins from Protective Edge, the Great March, the 2021 war, the Abraham Accords betrayal, and the devastating 2023-25 war, 42,000 Palestinians and 1,139 Israelis dead. With 95% aid dependence, Gaza's defiance clashed with US-backed Israeli power. Peace remains elusive. Join me for Chapter 12. Like, subscribe, and share your thoughts. The deep chapter continues. See you in the next chapter.